73% of sexual misconduct reports in schools in the state of Texas not investigated. There is no world in which any of these accusations would be considered benign, and yet they still are not being investigated. Why? The agency just doesn't have the administrative resources.
That sounds a tad suspicious.
All right, welcome back to Come and Take It. We're going to call this week's episode, Get Your Kids the Heck Out of Public Schools, Part 10,000,002. As if you ever needed any other reason, okay? You shouldn't, but here, I will give it to you. Merry Christmas. Consider it an early Christmas present from me, all right? The public school system is rotten to the core. And what I'm about to share with you is just another reason in the very, very long list of reasons why we need school choice here in Texas, among other things, by the way. School choice does not solve all of the problems that I am about to share with you. It is just, of course, one component of complete and total overhaul and reform of the education system here in the state of Texas, okay? So from TexasScorecard.com, parent advocacy group Texas Education 911 released a report called State-Sponsored Child Abuse, School Employee Misconduct in Texas this week, or last week, and it followed 2 years of research. Now, this group analyzed school employee misconduct reports submitted to the Texas Education Agency. We call that TEA, all right? So I'm going to refer to the Texas Education Agency as TEA for the rest of the time. All right, so they are looking at school employee misconduct reports submitted to TEA between September 2021 and July 2024. Now, the researchers found that 6,888 reports of physical and sexual offenses by taxpayer-funded school employees perpetrated on students in just 34 months. 34 months, 6,888 reports.
That's gross.
Of just physical and sexual offenses, okay? There are other different, categories of misconduct. That was just for those categories of misconduct. Now, of those categories, 4,144 reports alleged violence. Let's see, there were 1,412 that were inappropriate relationships with a student. Now, I want to give you the definition of what that means, okay? That is defined by TEA as, quote, inappropriate conduct with a student or minor, including inappropriate communication, grooming, or solicitation of sexual conduct or a romantic relationship. So basically, they're working their way up to the sexual conduct. They just haven't gotten there yet. It got caught, it got found out before it rose to that level. My interpretation. You can decide for yourself. I just read you the definition, all right? And then of those 6,888, 1,028 were sexual misconduct complaints, which, let me give you the definition again. Sexual assault, continuous sex abuse of a child, or indecency with a child. All of those pretty big freaking deals, all right? So I just want to read this. I know I just gave you the some of the numbers here, and I want to dive a little bit more into the data, but I do want to read this directly from the report because I think that it's a really important point that they make that resonated with me. I think it will resonate with you. They said, with 6,888 reports of physical and sexual offenses against students in just 34 calendar months, 6 of which were summer months, the failure to protect the state's nearly 6 million taxpayer-funded school students and shield offending adults from consequences rivals the scandals that rocked the Catholic Church, the Boy Scouts of America, and USA Gymnastics. The statistics presented in this report are not just numbers. Each represents a child who is a victim of an adult employed by a Texas school, the majority of which were taxpayer-funded schools. As you hear all of the details of this story, you will notice that like you think that it gets as bad as it's going to get. You're going to hear me give this data and you're going to be like, okay, well, that takes the cake. And then you're going to hear me say something else and you're going to be like, oh, no, wait, that one has to take it just keeps getting worse, okay? Because across the 5 case codes involving these, sexual, violent misconduct, these physical and sexual misconduct allegations, 61% of the reports in the database, I'm not a mathematician, but I do know that that is a majority of the reports, all right? 61% have the disposition of did not open, which means they were not even investigated. The report in the database was not even opened, and 17% have the disposition of, quote, pending.
That sounds bad.
Okay, so a total of 5,421, or 78% of these reports were not even dealt with or had not been dealt with as of July 2024, whenever this group was going through all of these reports. I want to break it down for you just how egregious this really is. If your blood isn't boiling yet, you're not paying attention.
I'm angry.
Why don't you scrub back like 3 minutes or so and re-listen to this if your blood isn't boiling yet. All right. So I'm going to break it down for you by case category. 73% of sexual misconduct reports in schools in the state of Texas not investigated. 69% of sexual misconduct reports outside of school by a school employee pending. They're just pending. We don't know because they're pending. 74% of violence in school reports not investigated. 74% just didn't open, not investigated. And 45% of violence reports outside of school by a school employee not investigated. Not important enough to investigate, I guess. Violence being perpetrated on our students by a school employee, by an educator, by a teacher, not important enough to investigate. Sexual misconduct happening to our students, to our children, to our most vulnerable, not important enough to open. And you may really be asking yourself, why are they not being investigated? What possible reason would these people have, the TEA, for not investigating such serious misconduct reports? I mean, we're not talking about, there are parts of this report, there are parts of these, allegations that are like, didn't fulfill the duties of their contract, just something, maybe benign. Sexual misconduct and violence is not. There is no world in which any of these accusations would be considered benign, and yet they still are not being investigated. Why? Well, TEA Commissioner Mike Morath said the agency just doesn't have the administrative resources. Oh, that's it. They just don't have enough money.
That sounds a tad suspicious.
They don't have enough resources. If only you were to give them more of your hard-earned money, they could turn around and actually do something about these very serious offenses. Now, I want to be clear here. TEA is currently receiving $66 billion from local revenue, taxes, state revenue, taxes, federal revenue, taxes. $66 billion. That's billion with a B.
Taxes. It's the worst part of the game.
Oh, it's what?
Taxes.
And you're telling me with that amount of money in hand, you can't find the resources to investigate sexual and violent misconduct allegations in Texas schools? You can't, pull from somewhere else, pull from some COVID BS? You can't find the money to do that because if you'll notice, our kids are not actually being educated. All right. Most of the time, the money isn't going to that. The stats are there. The data's there. You guys are not teaching our children reading, writing, arithmetic. Oh, you're teaching them. You're indoctrinating them. You're not teaching them anything that they actually need for the real world. They're coming out completely unequipped to deal with adulthood, to be successful in life. But at the very least, we could, protect them while they're there for 8 hours a day. Protect them physically. Protect them sexually. Call me crazy. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's my expectations that are out of whack, that if a taxpayer, a citizen of a city, a county, just a resident in the state of Texas, if a taxpayer sends their child to school that they are paying for, they are paying these people salaries, at the very least, you could, protect them from harm. But they don't do that. And it's actually even worse because in the state of Texas, if an educator resigns before investigations are complete or before sanctions are formally imposed, it's like it never happened. There's no record of wrongdoing that exists, and there's no flag that shows up for that particular educator this is referred to as NASDTEC, National Association of State Directors of Teacher Education and Certification. It's a background check system. So there's no red flag that would show up on these teachers' records if they're given the opportunity to they're just like, oh, I'll actually just resign. Oh, I diddled a kid and it got found out. I'll just resign before the investigation is complete. And it's like it never even happened. We're giving these people an option to take an out and avoid accountability for very serious accusations. It's crazy to me. And I warned you, you're going to keep thinking that I've hit like the precipice, that I've hit the max of reasons for you to be outraged about what's happening in Texas schools. I haven't hit the max yet, guys, okay? The problem is even bigger than that. All of these things that I'm telling you are all compounding one another. These problems are all compounded by each of them existing together, okay? Because 30% of Texas teachers, Texas teacher hires now, are uncertified.
It's interesting.
Now, what that means, first of all, is that they have these are less quality teachers that are being hired to teach your children. So it is less likely that your children are going to learn by uncertified teachers. I would argue they're not even qualified to teach your children. But here's what that means for this particular issue, all right? When 30% of Texas teacher hires are uncertified, they are not subject to the same screenings as certified teachers.
Well, that seems like an oversight.
In retrospect, yes.
Here's what that means. Someone with a revoked teaching certificate could be hired as a long-term substitute in another district or teach in another state. Does that blow your mind? It blew my mind. And this group, Texas Education 911, actually identified specific examples of individuals whose inappropriate sexual misconduct with minors was reprimanded by a state agency. And then, after that, they were hired at a Texas school. How does that make sense at all? That these people will have the same amount of contact with your children, the same relationships are being formed with your children, the same level of access to your children, but one category of them has to go through a stronger background check, and the other category of them don't. Like, in what world would that be an acceptable idea? Well, just to summarize how crazy this is, because again, there are a lot of compounding factors. It stands to reason. You can disagree with me if you'd like. And by the way, if you do, I'd love to hear in the comments. Those of you who are watching, let me know what you think about what is going on with schools in the state of Texas. Let me know if your kids go to public schools. And if so, do you have any plans to get them out? All right. So let's just summarize all of this. It stands to reason to me that only a percentage of actual incidents are reported, right? Because people in every aspect of everything in life, not 100% of people are going to come forward about, 100% of whatever incidents are happening, especially when you're talking about students. So students aren't going to come forward about 100% of the violation. So you've only got a fraction of the incidents that are being reported. And of that fraction of incidents, you've only got a fraction that are even being opened and investigated fully. And of that fraction that's being investigated, the school employee, at the end of the day, has the option to resign before it's completed, and there's no trace of it ever existing in the file. Now, add on top of that, typically, these incidents are handled, it's all very hush-hush. It's all very quiet. They handle it independently, quietly, behind closed doors because they don't want to upset parents, and then nobody knows about it. So the system is rotten, guys. There's no accountability for anything, for educating our students, for crimes, for potential crimes, for misconduct. Nothing. No accountability. And it has to change. And I believe that it will. And I want to give you some good news, but we're going to take a quick break here, and I'm going to give you some good news. We'll be right back.
Hey folks, Chris Salcedo here. I've got something special for you, the Salcedo Storm podcast. As your friendly, liberty-loving Latino, I bring you a mix of engaging discussions to help us fight for our state and our conservative values. It's the perfect way to stay informed and engaged in what's happening around you. So, what are you waiting for? Don't miss out on the storm of information and entertainment coming your way. The Salcedo Storm podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, I said things have to change, and I think that it will. Good news. Incoming state representative Hillary Hickland has already filed House Bill 1551, which would require that public school districts and open enrollment charter schools notify parents or guardians of enrolled students when an employee at their children's specific school is charged with certain criminal offenses. These offenses include those that would require the individual to register as a sex offender, fair, the sale, distribution, or display of harmful material to a minor, fair, as well as murder and child endangerment charges. Fair. Okay. Now, also, according to this measure that has already been filed, the district must include in the notice to the parents the employee's name and position, whether the employee continues to be employed by the school or district, the length of the employee's employment, the specific offense that they are charged with, and a statement that a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty. All totally fair. Now, there may be some people who say, well, that's not fair because the court of public opinion is a thing and you don't want to put these people on blast until you find out if they're guilty or not. Yeah, sorry, screw that. You're dealing with children, okay? We are dealing with the most vulnerable of our population. You cannot be too careful when it comes to protecting them. You cannot err on the side of caution enough when it comes to protecting them, when it comes to parents being okay with sending them off, dropping them off every day, entrusting them to essentially sometimes unvetted strangers. That's already screwed up. And now you're telling me on top of that, you don't think that parents should know? Absolutely not. Screw that.
I will not allow it.
You cannot err on the side of caution enough. And clearly the TEA is failing miserably at that, by the way. So you can read the full report. You can find it. Texas Scorecard has a link to it in this particular story. And this is, again, this is the group Texas Education 911. I didn't have time to get into every single aspect of this report, but it is eye-opening. Every detail is important. Every detail is just very alarming and shocking. So you should go and read the whole thing if you have time. But this is just a summarized version to get your blood pressure boiling, because I'm trying to finally convince some of you who have not yet. Get your kids out of these glorified babysitting camps and demand better. And by the way, even if you don't have kids there at all, maybe you never had kids there, maybe you don't have kids, or maybe your kids are already grown. If you're living there, your taxes are still going to fund this mess. And we are still educating and raising the next generation who they're not going to be equipped to handle much of anything if this is what's happening to them. So it's up to us to insist on better. I think we can do it. And certainly here in the state of Texas, we should expect better. It has to change. But for now, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure, remember, hit the like button if you haven't already. Make sure to comment. And if you guys are, if you are listening on the audio podcast side, make sure to rate us, leave us a review that will help us in the algorithm, which we all know is stacked against conservatives. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time on Come and Take It.